Hey guys, Eric Bischoff here, and just want to call a quick timeout. I want to tell your listeners about what I've been telling everybody at over at 83 Weeks for quite a while now, about all the cool things that are happening over at adfreeshows.com.
Looking for classic Royal Rumble content? Ad Free Shows has you covered. First up, honorary DX member Kurt Angle watches back his favorite match of all time against Chris Benoit at Royal Rumble 2003.
It wasn't real smooth. This was a choppy match. It was like we were working for moves. We were working for holds. It wasn't like it was really a clean match, but that's what made it so good. It was ugly and it was choppy and you know, it wasn't like a smooth move that you do all, you know, nice and clean all the way through, or a smooth spot. This match was like gritty, and that's what I loved most about it. It was more of a fight than it was a wrestling match.
For the first time ever, JR watches back the final WWF pay-per-view before he joined the company, the 1993 Royal Rumble, which featured many Hall of Famers and, well, Virgil.
All right, next up, we got the man, the myth, the legend, JR. One and only, Virgil.
There he comes.
The meat sauce, the lonely autograph table, the whole deal.
That's him. Virgil's not known for many things. One of them, though, is his penis, allegedly. I don't think it's going to be this Royal Rumble experience, but I could be wrong.
If you're looking for interactive experiences, Ad Free Shows members joined Hacksaw Jim Duggan live, 35 years to the day of his historic win at the very first Royal Rumble.
In wrestling, as going way back as a kid, I live in upstate New York, up by Vermont. My dad would bring me and my sisters in Madison Square Garden to watch the circus. So to only imagine, bring my dad, who was my best man, to pull up in front of Madison Square Garden and see Hacksaw Duggan versus Andre the Giant.
That's just a small taste of what we've got waiting for you. With 4 levels to choose from, see for yourself why Ad Free Shows is the best value in wrestling today. Sign up now at adfreeshows.com.
Recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer himself, your friend and mine, Double J, JArrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, Conrad Thompson, the last outlaw, is just doing fine and dandy. Lots of things rolling on. And can I just talk about myself in third person today? Last outlaw,
I wish
King
you
of the
would.
Mountain, leader of the Four Horsemen, leader of the Bullet Club, leader of the NWO. Conrad, I wish people could see your eyes. They got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. I'm kidding, bud. I'm in a good mood today. Excited. Good training session in this morning. Lots of for those, we usually record that. Our kind of our cadence and our rhythm is recording on Monday mornings. Well, today, as we record this, you may be listening to it. It drops on Tuesday, but we're recording this on Friday afternoon. I have a busy weekend, headed to Orlando tomorrow. You might have heard of this place, Conrad. It's called Universal Studios. Headed down there. And then Sunday, I'm headed up to Springfield, Illinois. Lucky Horseshoes, kind of our one of our kickoff events, and got some internal meetings up there. And then head to Dayton for Dynamite next week. So the last outlaw, stepped in the ring with Danhausen this past week.
What? Wait a minute. What?
Life is good. Paul Walterhauser. I've got people in the back calling him, hey, did you see Paul Walterhauser is up for, I think he's now the SAG Awards or some other jabroni type love fest out in Hollywood where they get together and act like they're all important in the same room at the same time and say, hey, here's the Golden Globes. And here's, I could do so many wrestling analogies. It's all silly award shows. But Paul Walterhausen is, he is begging, he's itching. He wants the Double J rub. It's just that simple, Conrad. Your little pal.
What is it with these guys that come out of the woodwork every June or every January, whether it's Effie or Paul Walter? I mean, I love that. Is it Hauser or Housen today? Cause you do it different. You had Dan Housen.
It's Paul Walterhausen. Walterhausen's one word.
Oh, I got you.
Follow me?
I am following you. I'm following that you're in a good mood today. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk about something that I kind of thought we would never be allowed to talk about, Jeff. In this edition of My World, we're going to be talking about the time you returned to the company you created in 2017. And of course, we know that thing wound up with lawsuits all over the place. And now somehow today, we're going to try to navigate a conversation around this today, Jeff.
Good luck, pal. And I'll say this. I'm glad we're 50-50 partners in this. So I can blame you. No, all kidding aside. I'll just say this, Conrad. We will do our best. I'm certainly going to do my best to navigate our way through here. You said it, and you weren't joking. The end result of this relationship, and look, there was a lot of good stuff and good times and bad times and upside down. And, my personal demons came to a head toward the end of 2017. And we're going to kick this off, I think, around December of 2016, this episode. But yes, it did end up in court. Actually, the trial, if you will, which it was done during the pandemic in Davidson County in Nashville, Tennessee. We were the first, one of the first there, because of, picking the jury during that time. Again, I want to be careful what I say and what, probably more importantly, what I don't say. So you're going to have to help me. Just not that me and you need to play nice. I'm not saying that, but just what can and can't be said, I think is the fair way to say it. There's a lot of stuff that we can talk about, so I'll stay on the positive side here. But it's going to be a very, very interesting episode. And I'll say this, Conrad, there was so much what ifs and potentials, and just the first 90 days of 2017, what a whirlwind. Oh my gosh. We're going to get into it. I won't get too far out of it, but I'm looking forward to it, Conrad. And I'm, full transparency here, guys. We kicked this off, our relationship, publicly or in the podcast, My World. That was May of 2021. And Conrad told me, hey man, are there any kind of topics that are just completely, we're not going there? And I, of course, came out of the gate, Conrad, not a topic at all. And then I went, well, now wait a minute, let me think this through. Well, you probably said, hey Jeff, let's think this thing through. And as we kind of went down the laundry list, which ended up being, no, that's okay. No, we can talk that. This was one of those things that I said probably Conrad, for 6 months? No, yeah. I just, however long it was, I just said, no, we're not discussing that. And the persistence of County and research and everything that goes with it, here we are.
Well, let's try to piece together as much of this as we can. And I realize if we're not careful, we'll sidebar into 100 different directions, but I want to try to talk a lot about 2017 here. I do at least want to acknowledge that you come back to TNA in 2015 for a feud between Global Force and TNA. But the business affairs aspect, which, I think there were some missed payments, and there's the changeover from Spike to Pop. There's also a bunch of issues in 2015 and 16, specifically with Panda and Dixie and Billy Corgan and Aerolux, and eventually Anthem gets involved. Needless to say, here in 15, 16, 17, boy, TNA is going through some things. Fair to say?
And how little did I know?
Yeah.
I mean, look, there were obviously lots of public discussion, and the Billy Corgan trial that was more or less live tweeted, wouldn't you say, Conrad? I mean,
Yes.
there was some play-by-play stuff of that, and all of that was, well documented. But, just the quick kind of synopsis of, I resigned from TNA last week of 2013. 2014 was really, let's just try to figure out what the vision, what's going to be next steps. 2015 started putting the building blocks together. That's when the TNA situation, I taped the content out in Vegas again. And then 2016 out in the market, we're going to kind of get into this, but I had no idea. Yeah. And I think this is pretty safe to say that how many times TNA Ventures, I believe that was the name that when Panda completely sold it off in 2015, and we'll get into that to another episode. But that was when I finally was completely out of the company. Came back, they inducted me in the Hall of Fame, but it was basically game, set, and match 2015, and then from that point forward, it was no strings were attached to Dallas. Those days were over. It was all Nashville based, Dixie, Surge, and then as we're going to talk about, Anthem became with Billy Corgan and Anthem and all that. But I had no idea all the complicated strings and how it was pieced together and who owed what money and who had what power. And I still to this day don't really understand all of it, and I don't think anybody really does, except the true people in the middle of it, and that'd be Billy and Dixie and Anthem.
Well, we can't talk about what we don't know, but what we do know is at the end of 2016, the TNA program is airing on Pop. And of course, this is a television show that once existed on Spike and had a lot of penetration, was in a lot of different households, and Pop, maybe not as much. And I have to admit, I didn't know what Pop was or what channel it was, or that it even existed when I first heard that TNA was going there. I did, through trying to watch TNA, discover Schitt's Creek, and that was a pretty good show. So there is some decent stuff over there on Pop, but it wasn't something that it wasn't an A brand, to say the least. And so now, as 2017,
real quick, do you know where Pop originated from, their place on the channel?
It was a channel guide station, was it not?
Yes, it's a TV guide show.
Yeah.
TV guide channel.
Yeah.
Yes. It started airing little bits and pieces and blips of things. And then
it grew.
Brad Swartz, it was a joint venture, CBS and so I don't know, Lionsgate or something like that. Joint venture. But yeah, they transitioned it into a general entertainment network.
So we're going to talk about Global Force in more detail another time, and what the intention was and what the strategy was and all that jazz. But we got to do a full Global Force episode, at least for now. Sort of talk me through as much as we can. Who reaches out to who? Are you trying to just get a foothold somewhere and making calls? Because I know that you're a mover and a shaker and you're not scared of the phone. Or are they reaching out to you? How does this idea even first approached?
That's, old Connie, you're getting pretty good at this podcast game. No, because I was wondering, how are we going to dive off into this episode? And I know that the Global Force episode is coming and we're trying to figure out the timing on all that. But it's literally impossible to tell this. Jeff goes back to TNA without touching on Global Force.
Right.
And in, I think it was November of 2016, Ed Nordholm reached out to me. You talk about in a lot of ways, a shocking text. I just was, wow, this is kind of bizarre. Conrad, that wasn't on my, it wasn't on my ticket for me to, I just was really, really surprised. And the reason being, there were a small group of folks that knew, but this is something that I don't believe really ever hit the sheets. But in 2016, and we're going back several months into this, but I was Global Force, me and A. Smith Productions, Arthur Smith. He's got a laundry list of American Ninja Warrior, Hell's Kitchen. And I mean, he's produced all kinds of stuff. Me and him were in an agreement with Global Force, but we were under a holding agreement. You can call it a bunch of fancy different names, but we went into preliminary. It's a step further than discussions. It is the beginning of negotiations, but we Global Force was under a holding agreement to Fox Sports when Ed reached out. And so I think it's integral to the whole kind of mindset that they called me. I let them know I'm under this deal. They were persistent and said, hey, how can we figure out how you keep doing what you're going to do, but how does this work together? My delusional optimism, Conrad, as you can imagine now, after we're 90 plus episodes, how this in a lot of ways bit me in the ass. It just did. But I had a positive mindset that how are we going to figure this out? But being under the holding agreement to Fox, and I'll say this is another kind of set point. Two people were very opposed at the very get-go for me. I don't want to say entertaining the conversations, but letting the conversations progress. Any guesses on who those two people were that they did not want me to proceed with Anthem?
Dixie Carter.
No.
No.
Oh, Conrad, you're in a good match too. No.
Karen Jarrett.
Yep.
And if I had to guess, Mr. Jerry Jarrett.
No. So he was just kind of see what happens, if you will. But we weren't in lots of communication, but some. But Hermie Sadler.
Wow.
And I've always, he's been a longtime friend, but Hermie has, a lot of folks know him as a NASCAR driver and a Fox Sports personality, but Hermie's a hell of a businessman. His father's a hell of a businessman. He's been around high level business in the world of NASCAR for years and years and years. So I have always respected his opinion. And he, as a couple of days and weeks went on, he reached out and he said, hey man, can we have a conversation about something that you probably aren't going to like what I have to say? And I'm like, oh boy, where's this going? And he just kind of, I don't want to say laid into me, but he basically kind of laid out, you've been working your ass off in 2015 and 2016. And we know how, cause Hermie was right there every step of the way, we know how 2013 ended and how you were trying to just kind of find your way. Man, you've come a long way, and here you are under a holding agreement. Let that play out. Don't cloud the issue. Just see what happens next. Concisely let it play out. And so Karen had different reasons. She very
time out. Let me ask this, because you said earlier, and I didn't get to follow up on it, and we just kept moving. But you said I got a text from Ed Nordholm in 2014.
No, 2016.
Okay. So just to give everybody the timeline, I think it was WrestleMania weekend 2014. You announce you're forming Global Force Wrestling. In the time since then, you've done a bunch of PR, got a bunch of press, done some TV tapings. We're now 2 years and change past that. You have some stuff in the works with Fox Sports, and that's when this opportunity comes about. But I just wanted to make sure, because you did say 2014 earlier, that it is in fact 2016 we're talking about now.
2014. You're right. Just name the company.
Yes.
And I had an agreement with another production company that we were trying to find our way, all kind of uncharted territory. That never really materialized. I hooked up with Arthur Smith, and Arthur and myself sat down, and the strategy was, don't go create a pilot, go create a series.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense, don't go. So that was essentially, okay, the runway is not 90 days. The runway is really 12 months. And not that you're going to be able to create equity and branding and do everything overnight, but go create a series. And so we, put a plan in place to do 16 1-hour episodes. Alongside that, connections with minor league baseball. How can you run an economical tour? It wasn't about, we're going to go make $1 million. It was just get up and running and run shows. And so that was 2015 and 2016. As a part of that, we began to meet with different, when I say, and Eric's probably gone into great detail on 83 Weeks on that. When you start pitching shows, it's one thing to ask a network, hey, would you like 8 episodes? Would you like 10 episodes? Would you like 12? Hey, man, we can even do only 6 episodes. That's not the conversation in professional wrestling. The conversation is, do you want to launch a brand 52 weeks a year? I mean, it's a much bigger, broader conversation. So you don't ever do anything in one meeting. So multiple trips to LA, and that's what I'm saying. We're kind of getting into all this, but it was the building blocks. And when we had our very first meeting with Fox Sports in 2016, that was, Conrad, 72 hours before we even really had a follow-up meeting. They said, hey, essentially, we liked what we heard, and we'd kind of like to get you guys under a holding agreement. And you got to remember, this is prior to UFC even, departing Fox. So Fox knew they were going to be in a battle to keep UFC. If they didn't, well, we kind of know what happened, don't we? I mean, they lost UFC, and the door, in my opinion, was wide open for SmackDown for a lot of obvious reasons. But kind of in the middle of all this, we were under that holding agreement. And so, yeah, that was 2016, mid 2016, but it was definitely bleeding into at least 6 months of 2017.
So give me is that the time frame you had this development deal, this holding deal for 6 months, or is it more or less?
I think they asked, no, it was a 9-month deal with an extension of 3 at their option. Basically, if you get into negotiations, they can extend it out 90 days, which, hey, we were not even you can call us a startup, but I mean, literally an embryo of a startup. We welcome that, and we're excited about that. I mean, that's where, Karen and Hermie and others were like, hey, man, you're under an agreement. Look, is it making any money? No, but you're in that conversation. Let that play out. Don't cloud it with other wrestling brands and talent and conversations and your brain bandwidth, if you will. Does that make sense, Conrad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the people who care about you, Hermie Sadler specifically, are coming out and saying, hey, let's play this out. And I guess that makes sense, man. You would bet on yourself. Why not play it all the way out? What was Karen's perspective?
Put it real simple. Dixie was still involved. Nothing was good. She had seen, and I'd, through the disease of addiction, rationalized everything. But the easy way to say it is put my head in the sand. Didn't really want to believe a lot of the things, but she didn't see any upside to getting back into business with Dixie.
I can't wait to talk more about that some other time. But at this point, add some context to your relationship, if any, with Ed Nordholm, because I don't think that's a name that a lot of people knew maybe 10 years ago in the wrestling space. So chat me up about, when you get this text from Ed, what was the nature of your relationship prior to the text?
I'd never heard of Ed Nordholm. Okay. I mean, maybe the name, but zero relationship. I mean, zero. It was, the text was simple. Hey, Jeff, my name's Ed Nordholm. His title at Anthem. We have acquired, whatever it is. Would you want to get on a phone call to have a discussion? You can imagine what my response was, Conrad. Sure. Nothing can go wrong. Nothing hurts to have a discussion. So Conrad, that text, and, I don't know if it was the following day, but it was real soon. We set up a conversation. And me and Ed hit it off day one. Literally day one. He's a mergers and acquisition attorney that is one of Lynn Asper's right-hand man.
Lynn Asper, of course, is the Asper family, the folks who own Anthem and a whole bunch of other stuff. Super wealthy Canadian family. Most of us listening to this have not and probably won't ever have a conversation with Mr. Ed. What do you think you can tell us about him and his personality and all that?
If you talk to Ed in a business setting, he's an attorney by trade and a damn good one at that. Mergers and acquisition, concise, to the point, very professional. From a business setting, accolade after accolade. He's a mergers and acquisition attorney. On the personal side, and a lot of folks may or may not know this or heard this or this, he is a funny, fun-loving, easy to have a conversation with, energetic, just a good dude. I mean, we hit, like I said, we hit it off, and out of the first conversation, probably when we ended, it was very much agreed upon. You do what you do, and I'll do what I'll do, and I think we can make a hell of a team. He made the conversation multiple times because I asked him, like, what's this all about? How did we get here? And he said, through the course of the due diligence. Now, look, to go way back, the Fight Network was one of TNA's early. I mean, they've been a part of the TNA international family for years and years and years. After 2013, they did bridge loans, and when they got into some financial situations, but they had been around. I'd never met Ed, but he had been a part of the Anthem family for years. And so they saw, look, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they saw the asset of TNA program, the value of it for years. I mean, for a lot of years. That, I think, at the end of the day, was their first attraction. Then when they saw that there was an opportunity to potentially acquire it, they maneuvered themselves in there in a very smart, strategic way. Again, another podcast, but excuse me. The Corrigan situation, all that unraveled. But I had no context. I didn't worry about that. Ed's conversation with me was, hey, we want you to come run the wrestling operations. That isn't what we do. And we've done our due diligence. And essentially Ed's quote was, every conversation we've had, whether it was current folks or past partners, because they had reached out to partners because they had fringe relationships with all of them. All of them said, I think you need to go have a conversation with Jeff Jarrett. I think you need to have a conversation with Jeff Jarrett. That was the real underlying sales pitch to me from those guys.
So talk to me a little bit about Billy Corgan, because you mentioned him there. And of course, everybody who was sitting on the sidelines, just reading the Observer every week, boy, he was all over the place, with this story in 2016. And it felt like he was going to get his hands on the thing. And then of course, the big announcement comes out on January 4th, that Anthem Sports and Entertainment, the parent company of the Fight Network, announced the purchase of TNA Wrestling. And that's obviously a big deal. But now Corgan's on the outside. Did you have any relationship with Billy Corgan through that TNA adventure?
Now, Billy had come to live events. I remember one in Oak City that Billy came, and I think he was in the middle of the tour, but he came and sat beside JB at ringside. I mean, I knew Billy as a great business mind, lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins, and a good friend of Jeremy Borash. I mean, that was, lack of a better wordsmith, that was the context. In 2016, when all that unfortunate drama. And I know there was dollars attached to that. So I hate to call something with a lot of dollars attached just drama, but all that stuff that was going on, that was obviously one of the first real due diligence questions that me and my legal guys said. Like, where are we at with everything? Where are you guys at with it? Basically, what is Jeff stepping into if he accepts this role? That was really what I wanted my attorneys to do is, hey, really lift the hood up on this. What am I getting myself into? Again, once I kind of told my crew and the folks in Hollywood had that conversation, they were like, can you just kind of give us another 60, 90, 120 days? And I'm like, I think the time's right. I think there's a real opportunity, and we're going to get into this with AAA. There's just a lot of moving parts that I thought if we could get it under, and I don't want to say one umbrella, but if we all could have this collaborative working relationship, I think there's money to be made. Now, again, I hate to rephrase this again, but you touched on it. I knew the Spike deal of 22, 24 million a year revenue was gone and wasn't coming back anytime soon. So with that being said, it was going to take a collaborative effort of multiple promotions working together, because at the end of the day, this is obviously prior to AEW, Conrad, and you know that talent needs they need work.
Yeah.
They need to get out and peddle their wares, if you will, and learn their craft. And we got to have places to develop talent. We just got to the churn of the wrestling business. Well, if TNA's just doing TV tapings, no house shows, and AAA wants to get into this market, and maybe Noah wants to have a little bit better USA presence, and there's some international stuff going on in the UK. Well, if we have kind of a quasi working agreements, and we have 30, 40 pieces of talent that are getting as much work as they want, there's something there. So that was something that Herbie didn't want to hear. Karen damn sure didn't want to hear. My LA folks kind of understood, but also said, hey man, the big money is in the TV deal, and we're under an agreement with Fox Sports. We all know that the UFC has a pivotal role in budgets with those guys and scheduling and all that. But let's just see how it plays out. Well, I wanted to move forward, jumping off. Anthem had just acquired it, signed all the documents. Billy was essentially whatever that game set match was, and Dixie was, in their words, not mine, Dixie's in the box. There are no, she doesn't have decision-making power. I said, that's all that matters. I can more than coexist with Dixie Carter. But if she has decision-making powers in a wrestling entity, I've been down that road. I'm not interested. So once all the, I thought, hurdles were cleared, I was ready to move forward, because I just thought there was going to be a real opportunity to integrate all the promotions, and Global Force could be launched on a network. But grandiose plans didn't work out, did they?
We're going to talk about that. But first, I want to follow up on something you said there, where you said, well, I wanted to make sure that my people did their due diligence on what I was stepping into if I stepped into that role. What was the official role? Like what do you remember the official title?
Well, I know that we had to, the early January tapings, it was too quick, because we were, for the lack of a better word, we were working out an agreement, and I understood Anthem's point of view is, hey, you just can't come date us, but once we you're not going to marry us, you're just going to date us. And if you get this TV deal, you're just going to up and fly away. Nope, we're not going for that. So we had to figure out an agreement, basically a merger, Conrad, that once, if things were going to go according to plan, that the rising tide, all ships would have been lifted. How we were going to merge, and the trigger points, and obviously the 16 1-hour episodes, and that's what came into play in the litigation months and months later. So for lack of a better word, we were merging the companies, and I'll get into that as you ask questions. But my first role was in January, we agreed, hey, Jeff, we kind of know what we'll call it your salary consulting fee. You know, it wasn't a wrestling fee. It was basically an executive role. Let's just start you January 1st in a consulting role, knowing that, you know, you're moving into an ownership role after the post-merger. And as a part of that post-merger, whatever that title can be, chief creative officer, I think there was, oh man, maybe executive vice president, chief creative. It was one of those terms, Conrad.
But you weren't losing sleep about that, really.
No, heck no.
Yeah.
Not at all.
We're not losing any sleep these days, thanks to our friends at Chili Sleep. In case you haven't heard the news, Sleep Me is the new home for Chili Sleep, bringing you the same great sleep that Chili Sleep offered, but now under a new name. Sleep Me makes the coldest and most comfortable sleep systems available. They create the environment that meets your body's natural need for lower core temperatures, promoting deeper, more restorative sleep. Chili Sleep makes the Ooler, the Cube, and the Doc Pro sleep systems. All of them are water-based, temperature-controlled mattress toppers that fit over your existing mattress to provide you your ideal sleep temperature. These mattress pads keep your bed at the perfect temperature for deep, cold sleep. Sleep Me systems are designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and give you the confidence and energy to power through your day. They also just launched the brand new Doc Pro sleep system. It has 2 times more cold power than the other models. It's whisper quiet, and it has a tubeless mattress pad design that allows for 5 times more cooling contact. My wife's favorite thing about this is it's sort of like a smart thermostat for your bed. You get an app, a Sleep Me app, which is just amazing. A Sleep.me app where you can actually adjust the doggone temperature from your phone. You can also do sleep scheduling. So my wife climbs into a warm bed, but she don't want to get all hot and sweaty, so it cools her off. But then she has it automatically scheduled to warm her up, to wake her up. It's a game changer in my house. We're sleeping better than ever. And I think you will too. Check it out. Head over to sleep.me/myworld to learn more. Save 25% off the purchase of any new Doc Pro, Cube, or Ooler sleep system. This offer is available exclusively for My World with Jeff Jarrett listeners and only for a limited time. That's sleep, sleep.me/myworld to take advantage of our exclusive discounts and wake up feeling refreshed every day. So, Jeff, the other thing I wanted to ask about here is, we know that you've got this new offer. We know that Hermie Sadler is not nearly thrilled about the idea. Maybe Karen isn't either. But you hit it off with Ed, so you're at least having some conversations. What are the next steps? Do you guys get together in Nashville and do a face-to-face? Or after that initial text message and phone conversation, where do we go from here?
He was in Nashville often. I want to say that right out of the gate, we met at the Hilton downtown. That was the first meeting, maybe the second meeting. Then, we had to, and I say we, the TV taping, we had to create content. The churn of creating content was upon us. And so we had to figure out, okay, I think X amount of episodes were shot and in the can, but we've got to get to Orlando and shoot content like ASAP. And so that was really, for lack of a better word, hit the ground running probably is an understatement of this relationship, because there was no time to strategize and plan and really think things through. And I'm not saying that it would have been radically different, but it was the immediacy of, and look, there was contracts coming up and guys on day rates, and not all the talent, if any, were really even happy with the situation, which Ed inherited. That's another kind of situation that I inherited or stepped into, a situation in a lot of ways that I didn't create, not making excuses, but that was the reality. But Ed was in a lot of ways pretty much the same thing because of the Corrigan and Dixie set of circumstances that had taken place for the prior 12 to 24 months. So Ed was in Nashville. Skyway Studios, the offices where they had moved since they left Cumming Station, which was the old TNA offices. So it was, let's get our ducks in a row as quick as possible and figure out what next steps are. Big John Gaborik, who had been there for several years at this point, he was, I believe his official title was in charge of creative, charge of production, and charge of talent. So everything ran through him. And so it was, I guess it's easy.
From your standpoint, are you being brought in to essentially replace him or work with Big?
So that was like almost, I mean, yeah, the first conversation, or certainly a part of the end of that first conversation and well into the second one. So who is the team? Who are you keeping? Who are you letting go? Because it wasn't, hey, Jeff, the initial conversation, we're bringing you on, and they made it real clear that we're keeping John, but we want John to really work more on production. I'm like, okay, that's really John's skill set. That was what he did at WWE. And, he's a childhood friend of Kevin Dunn. And so John raised in the DNA of television production, and he's worked on all kinds of shows with WWE. He's back with them now. He's a big part of production for all the Saudi shows. So John, that production is his skill set, arena production and that world. So Ed indicated to me, and this is where, I don't want to get too far of it, but that the indication was John was going to be moving over and production was going to be his ball of wax.
So before we go any further, I just want to remind everybody that when this news comes out that Anthem has purchased the company, they don't own 100% of it. As it's written in the Observer, Anthem's going to own 85% of it. 10% will be retained by Aerolux and 5% by Dixie Carter. Before we get to Dixie, we've heard the name. I think it's a marketing company in Brentwood, but I don't know much about it. What can you tell us about Aerolux?
Marketing and production company based in Brentwood. Jason Brown, the owner at the time, Ron and Don Harris were affiliated with those guys. And, so basically a production house was their role. Now, what was interesting is that that ownership split. What's your perception of that ownership split? Because maybe I'm assuming incorrectly. What's your perception, or what do you think the world's perception was of that ownership split? Oh boy.
I think Aerolux at 10% is probably thinking, hey, this will be a way to guarantee future business and maybe, hang on to something that we thought we had a bigger piece of. I don't know. But the Dixie thing at 5% feels a little bit like vanity, maybe. Like at 5%, who cares? This is, I don't mean to diminish it. But you ever see one of those episodes of Shark Tank where they come in and they offer the sharks 3% of their company? It's like, who gets excited about 3% of anything? Well, sort of the same thing here. Who gets excited about 5% of anything? I don't know what the profits were in 2016, but saying, well, I'm getting 5% of those. Yeah.
And look, I'm not going to get into all the details, because I still, even with great recall at times and sometimes horrible recall, Conrad, look, Aerolux and Dixie it's all about debt load.
Yes.
We're going to reduce. Yeah, that's all it is. There was no profits.
No. And I mean, at that point we're talking about, can we try to make some of these folks as whole as we can? And then they retain a little bit of ownership, but essentially the press release is going to let everybody know that Dixie is resigning from her position as chairman of Impact Ventures, but she's still going to be involved. Talk to me a little bit about the Dixie piece. When you're saying who is the team, and you sort of gave us the lowdown on Big, What were you told would be Dixie's role at all?
And see, what's weird is when I read the research, you talk about something that I totally forgot about, because after the initial conversation, and I had that straight up with Ed, I personally, look, I can coexist, whatever you got to do. You guys saved Anthem. And again, I didn't then and I didn't now completely understand the Corrigan piece, but regardless, it's yours now. And you did what you had to do. So you have obviously existing relationships with Airlux, with Dixie, with Corrigan. That's yours. But moving forward, as far as decision makers in the room that have the decision-making power, that's very important to me. Because the branding here of GFW and the content and what we're headed for and the Fox Sports Holding deal is one thing, but just the day-to-day operations, I don't want to fight City Hall anymore. I did that for a lot of years, and there's nothing good that comes from that. And they assured me we are going to handle that. In a release, I can remember saying that. I'm like, well, how's all that work? And he goes, financially, that was done October or whenever it was. When they funded that last deal, that they took over then. It was theirs. They were the ones writing the checks, and it was theirs. So there wasn't really an equation of Dixie in it.
Well, it's noted that you and Karen and Dutch are going to be at the TV tapings, and Dave would even say Dixie Carter, even though she has a public title, is out and wasn't there. This was the restart with the new owners. There was very little different. They had the same talent, the same positions that they'd seemingly been in for months. And he would basically say that you and Dutch were brought in as consultants, Dutch as a creative consultant. So let's work backwards. When you are told, hey, this is going to be your thing, we want you to run it, I imagine you thought, well, let me just go see how things are going now, see what we got. And I know I can trust Dutch to have my back and give me his honest take and 2 cents. So I'll bring Dutch along. Is that pretty much it?
It was 3 guys. Look, I'd like for Dutch to be a part of it. I like for Scott Demore to be a part of it. I like for Sanjay Dutt to be a part of it. That was the mindset. And Dutch, we'll call it the wise owl and creative, and just kind of get a sense and a vibe and everything that goes with that. Scott, I'll say essentially from a talent relations point of view, and Sanjay, kind of that overall blend of creative and talent and fresh ideas and everything that went with it. That was essentially the mindset of if I'm coming in to run wrestling operations, let's get the team in there sooner rather than later. I understand. Look, and at this stage, and we're right now, we're talking end of December going into January. And I found this out later, and then much later in detail. And then obviously, I had no idea on this deck of cards they were playing with. I wanted to see budgets early. Like, what are the budgets? What can and can't we spend on what are my guidelines? What are my, that was something that was very important to me is that, hey, Ed, you're a business dude. Mergers and acquisitions, bottom lines, profits. I mean, he took companies and made a career out of, acquiring a company at X price and selling it at X price, or merging it. That's what he did. So I said, I need to have numbers on where we're going with things. That was that was our first kind of we'll call them speed bumps at first. They later became roadblocks, and then they later truly became pileups. It became a disaster just because I don't want to get too far down the road here, but that's where it really turned sideways. Lack of clarity. But these early stages were, if we're coming in and you want me to run wrestling operations, basically talent, creative, and have a say in the the production as it relates to the finished product, which Kevin Sullivan later became an integral part of this conversation. So Yeah. And as I'm just sitting here talking about it, Conrad, the potential of where we were headed and where we ended up. Wow. Go ahead.
Talk to me a little bit about Karen. You know, it's in the notes here that she actually comes to that first TV taping with you. Did you get her a gig, or is she there just as Jeff's wife?
No, she wanted to work, and she had a conversation without me, with Ed, and basically says, I'd like to be a part of whatever role you see fit. And they worked out their own deal on their own terms, on their own time.
What was her role supposed to be? Because
you know what, again, back to titles, but let's just say, probably something along of a, creative liaison, maybe.
What is a creative liaison? I'm just trying to understand. Like, I know she's a hell of a performer on camera. I'm just wondering.
I'll call it, and that's what I was thinking. Were they still called the Knockouts Division? I was going to say dealing with the female component of the industry.
I got you.
Whether it's makeup, whatever, talent relations. It's a different day and age. Having a female in talent relations, having a female in creative. I'm not saying writing the shows. That's why I
but she would be a manager. She'd be in a management role overseeing the ladies' side.
Yes.
Okay.
That, in short, yes.
Okay. Got it. So,
you know what I'm saying? Not just creative, not just talent relations, but a conduit.
If management needs information disseminated to the female side of things, Karen's going to go put a brave face on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your first TV taping's back. What do you remember about that day?
Surreal. It was in Orlando, in so many circumstances that it happened rather quickly. I knew, it goes without saying, I knew that there were folks that I had worked with day in and day out for the last 2 years that were not huge fans of this situation.
What do you mean?
Just what I'm saying, Hermie and Karen and my LA folks, and Sanjay had obviously worked day to day, and Scott had worked day to day. They didn't voice their opinion as a part, and I probably didn't ask them, but I guess that gave me a sense of I'm going to dig deep and do everything in my power to make this work, because I knew the potential and opportunity that we had. I wasn't delusional in thinking that the Impact show, because after you've had a run of, at this point, almost 10 years, it's not like you were going to step back in. The pop rating was the pop rating. So how are you going to convince another network, hey, we're going to go back to doing 2 million viewers a week? That just wasn't going to happen in 2017. It just wasn't. But if we put the building blocks together, I think there was going to be an opportunity. So going in the first taping, seeing the talent that were there, and I know Gabor, there was who was coming and who wasn't coming. I had no say because it all just happened. Hey, this is the talent that's going to be there this week, and we've got this written and that written, and I'd have to look at episodes to see what kind of input or if I don't say rewrote, but I'm just trying to think of what my input was on all of it. I know the building blocks were already there.
So talk to me a little bit about, when you're doing this taping, you're sort of thrown right in. Had you been keeping up with the product on a consistent basis, or are you sort of just reading about it from afar, or are you really trying to play catch up here?
I'm sure I'm planning to play catch up to the details, but for the most part, I generally kept up. I try to keep up with a little bit of everything, but
yes.
Do I watch every segment of every show? It's impossible. But generally speaking, I was aware of it.
The hot thing that really got hot and had sort of breathed a little bit of new life and got some big attention for Impact was the Hardy Boyz and their deletion component of their characters. And at this first set of tapings, the Hardys are going to challenge the Bucks of Youth at one of the tapings. Of course, we know that's going to go on to be the Young Bucks and big part of AEW. Talk to me a little bit about what your relationship was like with the Hardys at this point, because they're probably the top act in the whole company. Would that be fair to say?
For sure, the top act. And me and Jeff have always had a tighter relationship than me and Matt, or past. Me and Matt now see each other every week. So the set of circumstances have changed. But I tell you what, right off the bat, well, the first was budgets. That me and Ed, I can't say that we got sideways, but just no clarity. Then the transparency on the Hardy situation, and as we'll get into, it really caused, and I'll take full responsibility for any and everything that I got out of line saying. But the honesty and transparency of my understanding of not just the Hardy contracts, but the Hardy positioning and the final deletion P&L. I was not told, and still don't really know the exact details, but I know kind of going through this. And again, I'm going to go back. I don't know how much, who was promised what on dollars and cents from all the parties that be. And I want to say Dixie and Ed and Corrigan and whoever else from production. It was a very complicated layer. But yes, the Hardys were by far, I say by far, but yeah, they were the most overact, and their contract was coming up for renewal. And it was at the very top of the talent list. What direction are we going with them? And, hindsight's 2020, but I'm looking to Ed for guidance. And not only was I not really getting clear guidance, I was getting misinformation.
What type of misinformation were you getting? Can you give me an example?
Well, there was, and there were, contractually speaking, my understanding was that, and I was told from Anthem, not just Ed, from Anthem attorneys, they own final deletion. They owned it all, which made sense to me because it's
on their program. Yeah. It's
on their programming. I don't think that was the understanding because of, I guess, a number of factors. Maybe what they had agreed on before I got there. I know that
let me ask this. You said the words P&L a minute ago. I didn't know the deletion P&L. Were you saying in terms of how strong their merch sales were, or were they self-financing some of that stuff? So therefore, maybe since they wrote the checks for it, they owned it.
Well, and see, that's where I never could get a clear understanding, but that was, in my understanding, the reality of the situation is that Matt and Jeff had paid for some of, and again,
the expenses.
You can wordsmith some 90% or 10%, but they paid for some of the expenses that I'm like, okay, who owns it?
Yes.
Who's going to get paid back? Are you not getting paid back? Who told you to expense that? Who told you not to expense that? All that kind of stuff. What really mattered to me was who owns it?
Yeah.
Who owns the IP?
Yeah.
Like, if you come up with a creative idea at WWE, great. WWE still owns it.
Yes.
And there's not even a gray area. So the kind of conversations I said, I know certain folks paid and didn't pay and this and that. I get that. But as far as the IP, who owns it? Who doesn't own? Well, I was told over and over and over, we own it. We own it. We own it. Okay. We own it. And I know it feels like, Conrad, I'm getting too far down because you asked who's the top talent, but they were, and I wanted them re-signed. If I'm putting together a roster, I need to know who the roster is to kind of do the building blocks. But not only that, if they're the top talent, they're going to take X amount of the budget, which, hey guys, what is that budget? And then I'll know what is left over, what's there. Again, Conrad, these were the kind of early problems that were, man, what do I always say, Conrad? Over communicate.
Corporate wrestling doesn't work. That's what you always say.
Yes, it damn sure does.
The other top talent that's here, and man, it's crazy to think. I mean, guys, let's just run through. We got the Young Bucks wrestling the Hardy Boyz. The Hardy Boyz have taken the world by storm with this deletion stuff. Who's our champ? Drew Galloway, who we know these days is Drew McIntyre and headlining WrestleManias and major stadium shows. And it's a loaded roster here. You got plenty of talent to work with, but Drew's contract is going to be coming due as well. So Matt and Jeff Hardy and Drew Galloway all coming up. I'm sure you're trying to deal with all of that. We know ultimately the Hardy thing doesn't work out and it gets kind of ugly. How involved in that were you?
In which part?
The separation of the, I mean, did it come down to, as JR likes to say, cash and creative, the two C's?
Now look, hindsight's 2020, but I was desperate, may be a word. I really wanted to re-sign him, but I couldn't figure out why Ed and John, but really Ed, why we couldn't get a clear answer. Are they in or they out? Are they in or they out? Are they in or they out? And I'm like, at some point, you got to fish or cut bait. That means either they're on their team or they're off.
Right.
Where do you stand? And I really couldn't get an answer, which was super frustrating on top of the lack of budget direction. And when I say budget, I don't want that just to be a talent conversation, because you go to Orlando, you can go every other week. So when you go, you shoot 2 shows in 1 day, or you go every 6 weeks and you shoot 6 shows in 4 days. Or, I mean, you can do the math and sliding scale and all that, but kind of the lack of direction on what we could and couldn't do as a part of production. But then you throw in the talent, like who's on the team, who's off the team. So I was, and this is where, man, if I could have picked up the phone and talked to Matt and Jeff just one-on-one and get a clear answer.
Why couldn't you?
Ed did not want that. Ed wanted, again, Ed heard a lot of great stuff about me coming in the door, but and we talked about that. He also heard, whatever you want to say, the negative stuff.
What was a criticism of you back then?
Well, I think Ed's point was, Jeff's going to come in and take ownership of things, and he's going to do things. I'm trying to think how he would classify it. Ed did not want me, I don't say above him, but doing anything. Ed wanted to be in the middle of it because Ed was the keeper of the keys for Anthem's money. So I understood that. But when you deal with talent, yeah, it just goes without saying. An attorney dealing with talent is completely different than a veteran dealing, me being in the business. It was just a completely different set of circumstances, but Ed wanted to handle the negotiations. Again, he's brand new into the business. I would gather to say he's got a different perspective today. At this point, he's 2 months into owning the company, and he wanted his hands in everything, and rightly so, but he wanted to run point on all the negotiations, and he did. He wanted to take my advice on my side of it, and some he took good and some he didn't take at all, but he wanted to run the show.
How did that work for you? What was your thinking on that? I mean,
I can remember sitting at the kitchen table having a conversation with Karen and saying, he's only going to learn by trial and error. And this could be real painful. And, I was very frustrating when I knew that he was having conversations, not just with the Hardys, with other talent. And he would, I don't want to say use my name, but refer to, maybe not in these words, a Jeff said.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to Jeff, sort of thing.
That type deal. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly the message. But again, I don't think he was trying to do good cop, bad cop. I think he was new to the industry. And look, my dad gave me this education years ago, and it's one of those ones that at the time you don't understand how valuable it is, but as time goes on, it's everything in the point that when you we'll call it a promoter because that's how my dad classified it. But whether it's a promoter or a booker, but when you're dealing with talent, it is a unique relationship in that at the end of the day, the talent has to sign up and say, here's my career. I'm putting it in your hands.
Right.
When you understand that concept, I'm not going to say it should, but if you view it through those lenses, I think Ed Nordholm would have gone, I'm not the guy that the Hardys are going to turn their career over to. It's just not going to happen. But when you have Lynn Asper and Anthem telling you, Ed, go to Nashville, their home offices there in Toronto, and get this ship straight and get it on the straight and narrow and get in this. Okay, so your highest paid talent would be the Hardys. Oh, I've got to run point on this. I absolutely have to run the show on this. It is really a difficult position to get into. And it ultimately, the wheels came off. If we would have just been renegotiating their financial terms, Conrad, that would have been difficult because they obviously had WWE in their minds. We were never going to overcome that. But they also had
a lot of freedom doing what they were doing.
Well, they had independent wrestling going. They had Ring of Honor going. They had the Final Deletion, which was kind of an undercurrent. Hey, we can take this outside of the Impact programming because let's be real, it was on Pop, and yes, Pop gave it its birth and all that. But you could have done that on YouTube, and you could have done different avenues on that. So you weren't dealing with just a tag team, and I never would want to call them just a tag team. But you weren't having a conversation on you weren't even having a creative and financial discussion about a tag team re-upping with a company. It was much broader. Me trying to diplomatically explain to Ed that you are the world's worst person to be in this position because you have no history with either one of those guys. And at the end of the day, you're asking them, hey, re-sign up with us. We're brand new to the game. And, hey, put your career in my hands. That was just, it was, Conrad, am I making sense of how difficult of a situation it was?
As if that's not enough. There's a snafu on January 12th on the Fight Network. This is the station that's owned by Anthem, the new owners of TNA. And they accidentally air last week's episode. So they do get the current episode up, but it airs in a replay spot. And Meltzer would say, what happened is that usually Fight Network gets a tape from TNA several days in advance. But in this case, TNA just finished production on Wednesday afternoon or evening, and it takes overnight to download an episode. So they couldn't start working on it until Thursday morning. Then as they were working on it, the file got corrupted and they weren't finished in time. They were able to finish by 10 p.m. and aired the show then. How many days into this did you look at Karen and say, I think we've made a huge mistake?
Now, what do you think the delusional optimist did?
Well, it'll be all right. I mean, it won't happen again. I mean, listen, we're going to get these kinks worked out, but goodness
growing
gracious.
Pains, Karen, growing pains, Hermie, growing pains, guys. We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. I mean, that was me.
I mean, I'm sure you had Jacob Ullman's number pulled up in your cell phone and almost hit send several times, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
You put a deal together with Crash, the company down in Mexico. I assume you worked that with Conan?
Yes. I mean, there was, again, this is where, and it's not that far of, long ago, but Crash promotion based in Tijuana, right across the border, that was red hot, great venue. Look, I wanted to bring LAX back. And, I don't even think in the notes, there's a lot of talent discussions this 2017, Conrad, I thought about this. This could be 3 episodes. It could be the beginning, the middle, which could basically focus around Slammiversary 15, one of my top 5 favorite shows of all time that I've been a part of. And then basically the last 90 days. But as far as Conan coming back in, two guys that became the new LAX, you might have heard of them, Santana and Ortiz, with Conan as a manager. I mean, they were magic. But yes, Conan was the driver of Crash. I knew it was going to be opportunity. They ran regularly. Again, AAA is very much a Hispanic project. Crash is a border town, so it was without question lucha libre, but a lot of American flavor there, and just man, there's God Almighty, what opportunities in 2017.
Well, I do think this will wind up being 3 episodes because there's no way we can cram all of this into one. But your return was so seemingly unlikely. I mean, and in a weird way, it's kind of a movie. You're back in the company that you helped started, and there's been some trials and tribulations and some he said, she said, and some hurt feelings and a lot of water under the bridge. But now you're back, and maybe with a lot less pressure even than the first time around, right? I mean, the first time you were just putting all your personal money in on this and living and dying every week and hoping you could eke out a profit. The approach here is a little different now, all this time later, 15 years later, right?
Well, Conrad, except the fact that I put my own money into Global Force Wrestling.
I see.
So the clarity I have today in 2023 versus the clarity I have there now. But Conrad, and we've covered this on other episodes, but my alcohol abuse radically went up in 2017. No excuses. It is what it is, but it did. And so I just compounded the stress and the issues and everything that went with it. So yeah, I started use the word trigger, but when you said, no, not as much stress, the hell it wasn't, Conrad. I was stressed to the max.
Why?
Okay. We'll call it just the Karen Hermie effect. You know what I'm saying? If that makes sense.
You want to prove them wrong?
Okay. That's one. 2 is, I had worked for 2 years with Global Force, and merging the companies, things had to hit right. And I'm not saying that we were going to start making $1 million overnight, but to create compelling content that is this going to work? I had all the belief in the world. We're going to get into World of Sport, and we just touched on Crashed, and we got AAA, and Noah's going to come into play in a minute. But getting all these promotions to kind of work together and see the vision and roll this thing down the court, and it goes without saying. In the back of my mind, is Dixie going to be involved? Is Corgan coming back? Because I think my understanding was Corgan was kind of done wrong. Maybe not by Anthem, but maybe by Dixie. Just all those. Again, I'm making my problems worse, all that. And then on top of all that, dealing with just the wrestling industry, Conrad, you've dealt with it a little bit on Ric Flair's last match, but dealing with talent day in and day out is not easy. It is a full-time job to be done right. I've always said that. Talent relations is a 24/7, 365 thankless job. But if it's not handled delicately, the wheels can come off overnight.
Well, I'll tell you what, the wheels are never coming off with our friends at backyardbutchers.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the wait is over. Quality steak, free shipping, period. The Backyard Butchers restaurant quality steak boxes are now available online. You can get steakhouse quality bulk meat specials responsibly sourced from American farms and delivered right to your door. And right now, for a limited time, Backyard Butchers is offering our listeners 15% off, plus free shipping. And oh yeah, 4 free ribeyes for life with every subscription. I got to tell you, I didn't know what to expect, but it exceeded my expectations, Backyard Butchers did. Because I thought, wait a minute. You're going to beat the grocery store prices? How is that possible? I don't know, but they've managed to do it. And I got a freezer full of meat now Backyard Butchers can hook you up, man. Steak, pork, chicken, whatever it is you're looking for, they got it. And as our old pal JR would say, it's restaurant quality, folks. So cut out the middleman grocery stores. You're getting responsibly sourced, 100% American-made beef, pork, and chicken right there from the heartland of America. It's going to be delivered to your door in an eco-friendly insulated box. Going to keep that meat at just the right temperature. They got great customer service too, but what I really like is that there's no gimmicks here, y'all. No memberships or subscriptions are necessary. But if you do choose to subscribe, you can cancel anytime. I recommend you try them once, and let me tell you, you're going to want to subscribe on your reorder. You're going to love the price, you're going to love the ease, you're going to love the quality, you're going to love the taste. And again, they're checking all the boxes: steak, pork, chicken. Why not take advantage of this special offer? Get 15% off plus free shipping and 4 free ribeyes for life. All you got to do is visit backyardbutchers.com, use our promo code MyWorld, and you'll get 15% off plus free shipping and 4 free ribeyes for life. That's backyardbutchers.com. Use our promo code MyWorld. So Jeff, listen, there's a lot to unpack here. I do want to ask about.
Hey, Conrad, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Just because, as you are well aware, none of this story has really been told.
Right.
Right. To point, I guess we're maybe an hour or so in. And we're best buds, talk all the time.
Yeah.
And you know bits and pieces of this. Has anything that we've talked about today, I'm curious. I'm going to make, because we're both probably our biggest critics.
Yes.
And all that.
Yes.
Tell me give me your quick Twitter 140 characters list feedback so far, because I've always been curious. Like, people think they know the story of me going back in 2017 because there was a lot of negative stuff and this and that. We didn't even got into the Del Rio and Bobby Lashley and Dan Lambert and there was Bruce coming back. I mean, there's so much fun stuff here. But so I'll take a pause right now. Give me quick feedback. I'm curious. I really am.
Well, listen, I'm excited for us to talk about it because, I was obviously growing something to wrestle with Bruce, and I'll never forget. I was actually in San Antonio for the Royal Rumble with my kids, and I got a call from Bruce that said, "You're not going to believe this." And he told me that he had just had a conversation with you, and the timing of it was amazing because we had just done an episode trashing TNA and spilling the tea, as the kids say, about his time in TNA. And it set all kinds of records for our show. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. I think we crossed 1 million listens on that in the first month. Just that one TNA episode. It was bananas. Mm-hmm. And the idea that now they're calling for him to be back on the program was amazing. So I do want to talk about that, but very quickly it comes out in the newsletters that you're replacing Big, that you're sort of the wrestling guy now who's going to be handling wrestling for Anthem. And it also comes out that Dixie, although she technically has a title, is essentially a non-entity, and Surge is gone too. Bittersweet for Surge and Dixie to be gone and you to be back, or does that even cross your mind?
Remember, that was really handled in the first conversation or two.
Yes.
For a multitude of reasons. My attorneys were the same attorneys that they were with me in 13. They knew the Toby Keith acquisition story better than I did, candidly. Because they weren't emotionally attached to it. Let me phrase that. They knew the ins and outs, but the whole realities of the situation, though, that would have happened had it been for not Dixie not wanting it. So now here we are, 4 years later. Oh, wait, this company and Jeff, you really want to do this? So they knew that was, once they understood the debt structure and understood Billy and Dixie and Anthem's position, everything, they gave me the green, the thumbs up that, hey, if you want to do this, we may not agree with this, but Dixie's not a factor. Billy's not a factor. Airlux is not a factor. You are dealing with Anthem and Anthem only. And when we merged the companies, you two guys are on the hook and nobody else.
Talk to me about the positioning of the merger. You've mentioned it twice now. We haven't spent any, I mean, I know we're probably going to do a full Global Force show someday. Not probably, we will. But how was that discussed with Anthem? Like they were going to quote unquote buy your footage and buy Global Force, or what was the strategy? Or just talk me through that.
In a simple math equation, we will put a value on each episode of Amped. That's the 16 1-hour episodes. And that value, and it can be, look, you can pull a number out of the air, but what do we value a weekly episode of Impact? Okay, it's not going to be worth Impact because Impact's been on the air and you know, all that. But we came up with the number of what an episode would we valued at. They came up with the valuation of the company as it stood in January of 2017. And then you kind of got into the negotiation, like what's Jeff's value, you know, where are we going with this? So when we merged the company, what was my percentage? And I'll be giving you really broad strokes, Conrad, and you can help me clean this up and wordsmithing it. But we were determining the value of my ownership of the new entity, which would have been a Global Force Impact Wrestling Newco.
So talk me through just the timing of that and the finances of that as much as you can share.
Well, remember, first conversation was December 2016.
Right.
Amped was done. I had the 16 1-hour episodes. They're, you know, we got to, for lack of a better word, they're ready to air. You could clean them up and put, you know, you could splice in new content. You could do whatever you wanted to do, but that was content that could be aired. And so that was a part of the original discussion from the very, very beginning. And there was discussions on how we arrived there and lots of discussion. But if we are, all right, let me back up even further. Everyone collectively kind of agreed that, okay, there's value in the name TNA. There's value in the name Impact. Jeff, you've over here outside of this, you're creating a value in GFW. You know, where do we go with things? How are we going to navigate our way and come up with a brand? Did we ever completely land on it? That was more of a creative decision. But for lack of a better word, GFW presents Impact. Because from the very beginning, Impact was the name of the TNA show, not the name of the brand.
Right.
I thought that was day one, how we confused everything. We went from TNA presents Impact, TNA presents Explosion, TNA presents Bound for Glory. Then all of a sudden it was Impact's the name of the company. But we were headed toward going back to GFW presents Impact, GFW presents Amped, if we were to get a second show, all that kind of stuff. So does that make sense, Conrad? I
Yes.
want to make sure that I'm drilling down on the answer to your question, but that was the vision we were headed at.
Well, but you know, just to be plain speak, you guys have a dollar figure per hour, and there is going to be some sort of fulfillment where they're going to buy that out from you.
No, I was going to get that percentage of shares. The value
I got
would
you.
have been traded into. I have shares of the new company.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's keep going here and let's talk about how you're going to start trying to expand. You mentioned you're going to bring in more. Meltzer was very complimentary of him. We all know that Dutch was sort of your right-hand guy. So it feels like it's the Jeff Jarrett show again. You're going to talk to Conan about Crash, and it even comes out in the Observer that you've been trying to set up a meeting with ITV about World of Sport. Talk to us about that. I know a lot of our listeners here domestically might not be familiar.
So World of Sport is a weekly episodic wrestling show that aired in the 60s and 70s, and ITV is similar to NBC or CBS here in the U.S., but it was week in, week out, oh man, there are all kind of names you could say from the British wrestling scene, but it went away, and that's the domestic television. And shortly thereafter, then on Sky Sports came WWF programming, and Britain had never had their own home promotion that aired on nationally televised TV. And so there had been discussions internally of ITV. I think they used the terms reboot, rebrand, relaunch, all kinds of stuff, of bringing World of Sport Wrestling back. Ed Nordholm was, I believe he received a call through a connection, and it was kind of brought into the group. And I was obviously, Conrad, you can imagine, Super Bowl. I'm a huge proponent of British wrestling. I think there is so much value. For lack of a better word, Japan has their style of wrestling. Lucha Libre has their style of wrestling. The Brits have their style of wrestling. And, I'm going back to, my dad being a huge fan of Billy Robinson. And I mean, there's all kinds of ins and outs that we all could draw the analogy to. Adrian Street was a big draw in Memphis. And, anyway, so when this was kind of brought to the attention, Ed was super bullish on it. I was too. Hey, let's explore the opportunity and figure it out. ITV, I mean, comparatively speaking, they're not a USA network. They are a major broadcast network. Let's find out where we're at. And that was kind of, at this point, the discussions were going. Let's go talk to them.
So you're trying to expand internationally, both in Mexico and across the pond. And then it comes out that you're even having some conversations with Noah, trying to figure out what's over there. Crash, as a reminder, have a lot of great talent that are all under contract with Lucha Underground. Guys like Ray Phoenix and Ricochet and Brian Cage and Penta and Rey Mysterio. And then you even get a call from your old pal Dorian at AAA. Man, it feels like you're just throwing in the deep end. You're networking across the globe here now.
Well, and what was, Conrad, if I'd had my head on straight, but look, no regrets. Everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to happen. But Ed called me. I didn't call him. Through Conan, Crash reached out. Dorian reached out. Noah wanted to work with us. The ITV opportunity. It was one of those things. And I like to hustle and I like to be aggressive. These things were kind of the opportunities were coming, Conrad. But I look back and it wasn't a Jeff Jarrett deal or an Impact deal. I just think when you really, really look at it, the opportunity for a second brand to, in a different way, it wasn't going to be a TNA 2002 through 2009 set of circumstances. It was going to be a different opportunity for a brand to really gain a foothold in the U.S. because, the U.S. is where the bigger budgets are, the population are, the wrestling's bigger. There's independent wrestling all over the place, just all the time. Just the opportunities were abound. Man, Conrad. Yep. I'll say this. You think about this is 2017 and in 2018, Mr. Tony Khan and the AEW building blocks were put in place, and look what happened in 2019. When you kind of just look at the landscape, it was very, very interesting. And it goes without saying, Fox Sports knew that as well. They were well aware a second brand, there was space. I mean, all the powers that be. And that's a GFW episode. But having those meetings with the highest level of Fox Sports and hearing their perspective, when the SmackDown deal, that's another podcast, when that deal came out, it didn't surprise me at all.
You stopped and started a few times today. Do you, I don't know another way to ask this. I feel as if you are carrying around some guilt because of your substance issues at the time, looking back and thinking, what if?
And now I've processed it. I've let it go. But, and I can tell you this, in October and November and December of 2017, I did the best at that time to come to the grips of the reality of collectively every decision I made in 2017 is all on me. You know, I looked myself in the mirror and said, Jeff, you can point fingers at whoever you want to and just have a field day and rationalize and justify and minimize all the screw ups and all the mistakes. And man, just eat your heart out. Come up with every excuse you want. At the end of the day, pal, own up, man up. And Conrad, you know, it's what an experience. It is part of who I am today. But guilt and shame are two different things. And I know I've covered this. Shame is who I am. Guilt is what I did. I am guilty in 2017 of screwing up just about every business and personal relationship that I had.
Whew. Man, that's what I like doing about this podcast with you is you'll just let the old ugly truth hang out there. And I appreciate that candor and honesty.
I mean, Conrad, think about it.
Yeah.
World sport screwed it up.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go down. Well, in the world of sport, we'll get into that. That's a cool story too. When you kind of look at the result anyway, but yeah, I own it all, bud. I own it all.
I think this is going to be a multiple part episode, but I do want to ask about how things were getting, according to Dave Meltzer, a little uncomfortable in the TNA and Ring of Honor relationship, which at this point is really only the Hardys versus the Young Bucks match in Lakeland, since there are lingering past issues involving the JArrett-led version of the company and ROH from the past. What was your relationship with Ring of Honor or lack thereof? Why is AAA and Crash and Noah and everybody and their brother wanting to do business with you, but for whatever reason, there's a little hurt feelings maybe on the Ring of Honor side?
See, me and Joe Koff, I don't think we ever had, I know we'd never had a sideways conversation, but I was a little perplexed that kind of stuff was being reported in this fact that the issue was between Ed Nordholm, and I'll say this. I mean, yeah, I guess it was with Ring of Honor, but because he sent the cease and desist, and you'll get into that. But the issue was really between Ed and the Hardys. Are they going to sign or re-sign? It was, I'm on one side saying, hell yeah, re-sign them. But if they're not going to, let's move on. And it just got so complicated. But me being an issue, and look, I've learned so much over the last 4 or 5 years. I know internally at Ring of Honor, because we all started at the same time in 2002. The years rolled along, and our goals were obviously not aligned, and we shared talent from time to time. And then we got our Spike deal, and our talent wasn't as available. And then Joe came to us from Ring of Honor, and look, a lot of water under the bridge. But as far as Jeff having any disdain or dislike from Ring of Honor, that was all a bunch of wrestling nonsense. But I was aware of all that, and I'm thinking, hey man, that ain't me. That's it.
Something that comes out in the newsletter that I think we got to circle in on is, the company can't make money. Meltzer would say, because Anthem has spent so much money between the loans and the Billy Corgan settlement, there's just no way to make money right now. So they're looking at cutting costs, and there's been talk of cutting pay, which of course has talent unhappy. It all comes down to the budget. So you're tasked with our top acts. The Hardy Boyz are in contract renewal time. And because we've spent so much money just to get the company, to keep the company alive and to keep our arms around this thing, we probably can't offer them the money we want, and that's probably going to trickle down everywhere else. How quickly do you realize that things are not all rosy financially?
What month are we here?
January, February.
Oh, no, I think we're later than that. But okay. I probably rephrased that question wrong. Conrad, in that first 90 days, I went from, extreme optimism to extreme pessimism.
Okay.
Because became clear to me that Ed, I don't want to say shoestring budget, but a very, very tight leash. And it was.
Can you give me an example?
I couldn't get a talent budget. I couldn't get a production budget. Well, what do you think we need to spend, Jeff? Well, I don't have the piggy bank. I don't. Well, what do you think's the best case scenario? Okay, Ed, we're in growing pains. I don't think we need to go live weekly because we're on pop. We're not going to get an ROI there. And we probably don't need to do every other week. What I kind of think we need to do is use 2017 to get our sea legs under us and get our head around our roster first. And we need to get a marketing campaign, and I need to see how Fox Sports is going to play out. You know, Conrad, I could come up with a laundry list of things of, can we just kind of see where we're going to settle here in the next, I'll just say all of 2017. We've got NOAA opportunities. We got Crash. We got World of Sport. Let's see where we land on all this, was kind of my general thing. But with that being said, we've got to set budgets. Conrad, I couldn't get an answer for nothing. I mean, I tried, look, I won't get into the weeds here, and I think, I brought DeMore in. Well, we know where DeMore's at now, but I'm like, Scott, can you get an answer out of these folks? Hey, Dutch, can you get an answer out of these folks? Hey, John Gaborik. Me and John would scratch our heads in front of each other. And I'm going, John, I don't know how to really figure this out. Because if we're supposed to cut talent, okay, we've both had those hard decisions to make and hard conversations. But if that's the case, well, pal, how much are we cutting? No answers. In Ed's defense, I don't think he knew how to roll down that, because I kept hearing, well, we've got the Airlex note we got to pay. We've got the Dixie note we got to pay. We've got the Corrigan note we got to pay. They're paying things just to pay our bills before we put $1 in front of production, one part in front of talent, one part of administrative costs, insurance, post-production. We got to do hires. I was wanting to bring Sully in and his team and get that rolling. But from a financial perspective, it became clear that the capital was not going to be spent. I'm not going to say it wasn't there, because yes, it's there. It just wasn't going to be spent on this asset.
Let's talk about Mr. Galloway. We've talked about the Hardys. Did you see Mr. Galloway as the top guy? How big of a priority was he for you?
Wasn't around, I was around. That's the first time we got to work. And I've got to find the episode. I'll get Marcus or Derek, or, we got to, Drew cut promos that he doesn't quite cut today. I'll just say that. Drew is an emotional, very articulate,
yes,
knows how to convey emotion, knows how to have a cadence, and I mean, just lay a hell of a promo out there. So I saw him as a guy that, not just a top talent, that could kind of lead the charge. The Hardys are tags, lead the charge. But I also knew, because he had been doing independence for a couple of years at this time,
and he looked better than ever.
In 2015, he was when I came back there. Yeah, I mean, we can't, we can't afford him. Would be in my mind. That the reality is, it goes back to, hey, would you ever want a Goldberg in TNA? Well, hell yeah. Did you ever think there was a chance? Nope.
Yeah.
Zero chance. I know how Bill thinks financially, or at least close to it.
So did you sort of quickly abandon the idea that we're going to be able to snag the Hardys and Drew because it's sort of out of your control, and we'll just let Ed deal with it?
Well, it was always even Dale Oliver, who, and this is a unique set of circumstances. Dale's a guy that I've worked with since before TNA started, who did all of our music. He also produced Jeff Hardy's music that had nothing to do with TNA or Impact, he was his own personal producer. Me and Dale had conversations, and, we would both say, hey, Dale, I don't want to middle you, but maybe you can get an answer, because Ed doesn't want me talking to those guys. And at this point, I don't think they won't. I just don't think they want to talk to me, or who knows what Ed has been said. So I was trying to figure out, are they on the team or off? It was literally that simple. And I'm not sure exactly where we are in the story, but it went from let's get them to they're pulling Ed's chain to, man, this got complicated, because now you got IP and who owes what for what money on expenses on final deletion. Are we asking that? And then, of course, it was in everyone's mind, they ain't re-signing. They're going back to WWE. They ain't re-signing. They're going to Ring of Honor. They're not re-signing with Impact. It ain't happening.
So why did you think the Hardys wouldn't talk to you?
Ed. I think that
you felt like Ed had sort of, and boy, this has a bad connotation.
Sorry, go ahead. Say it again.
You thought Ed had poisoned the well.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm not going to say like spitefully. It is Ed's leading the charge. He's in charge of this investment from his bosses. Hardy's their top talent. Not that I want Jeff out, that, as far as it, he felt it was his job and his position to do it. I was kind of a byproduct. Jeff, stay out of this one. I got it.
Why didn't Ed trust you to handle that piece of the business?
I truly have no idea. Other than, hey, I don't know. Other than, this is one let me say this, because I was very clear with him as we're processing and talking this real time, because I was very clear that, Ed, I have no idea what went on from a financial perspective with final deletion. I wasn't a part of any of those conversations. So I don't know who owes what.
Right.
That was those conversations. And then on the who owns the IP, I can remember, oh my gosh, Conrad, 2 or 3 different conversations with folks in Toronto and Ed. And I'm saying, can you look, and I don't want to get in your business here, but can you look at the contracts that they signed as it relates to creating IP while they're under contract? Jeff, we've already done all that. We own the IP. And then I'm like, then there's nothing to discuss. Either they're going to re-up or not. But apparently there was a lot of gray matter in that, because to this day, my understanding is Matt and Jeff viewed it one way, and that's what legal disputes always end up being.
Yes, of course.
They viewed it one way, and Ed viewed it another. Here's the funny thing. Later, they kissed and made up, and I was on the outs with both of them.
It's amazing. Well, somebody you'll never be on the outs with is my staff over at SaveWithConrad.com. First Family Mortgage can help you save some money, folks, especially this time of year. Maybe you're looking to get a lower monthly payment. Maybe you're looking to make one of those New Year's resolutions actually happen and get out of debt. Well, we can help you do all of that at SaveWithConrad.com. And how about this for starters? Skip your next 2 house payments. That's right. If you haven't already, you don't have to make your February or your March payment. You're done until April 1st. And come April 1st, no fooling, you're going to have a cheaper monthly payment. We routinely help our podcast listeners save $500, $600, $700, $800 a month. You can do it too. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket, but you do need to check with SaveWithConrad.com. NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. By the way, I want to mention we have an A+ rating with the BBB. And you can read all of our 5-star reviews over at ConradReviews.com. You'll see more than 1,000 5-star reviews there. And in fact, our average rating is 4.72 stars, including this most recent review we just got. Everyone was very helpful, especially Diane. It was a great experience, even for someone with less than perfect credit. 100% recommend. That's what Jeff in North Carolina says. Seriously, go see how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. By the way, you can also email me your questions. We recently had a discussion over on Twitter. And Jeff, you may not even know this, but did you know that your Credit Karma score is not your real credit score? No, buddy, that's like your kayfabe score. But if you're curious about some tips and tricks on how to get yourself ready to fix your credit, to get ready to buy a house, we can help you with that too. We don't say no, we say not yet, but here's how. Check it out. Send me a DM at hey, it's Conrad. Send me an email, conrad@savewithconrad.com, or give me a call, 888-425-0105, or just find out for yourself at savewithconrad.com. Jeff, let's do a little bit more about, where we're going here in 2017. Cause I do agree with you. We could unpack this and approach it from 100 different angles, but it does feel like maybe the thing that got away, or the big opportunity, would have been this whole UK visit for the World of Sport. I think you guys actually make the trip over, you and Ed do, in February, and Meltzer would write, he heard the meeting went really well. And man, you want to talk about a big opportunity? There it is. Tell me what you remember of the ITV meeting and what the goals were, what we were aiming to do, what we were trying to pull off, and ultimately why it just didn't happen.
Well, that little video clip, or just that image you saw, if you're watching YouTube, and right now there's a big sun ray coming in, so my video's distorted. So apologies, Marcus, Conrad. But no, the ITV opportunity, Conrad, I think I went over there 3 times in 7 or 8 weeks. Preliminary discussions, how we're going to launch this. That picture was me and Tom McLennan, who I'm still buds with to this day, and we're staying in contact and got a couple of moving parts here and there. But he is super great guy, fantastic, but the Whiz Kid. No, he's a television producer, but he had a staff under him, and they knew they wanted a wrestling guy. So we went over, and they were looking at, okay, if we launch this TV series, how do we build the brand? How do we create multiple revenue streams? And being that Anthem, I don't say in a similar position, but look, we were an entity that in 2017, no house shows were being run, but we were creating content in the U.S. So how do we work together was kind of the short statement. But that picture was from the press conference that we had to launch the series. Going to do it Preston Guildhall. They ended up, because we weren't a part of it, moving to another location that got pushed way down. And look, for those that don't know, I kind of set the table on what World of Sport was in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. World of Sport was a reboot of that series. When it was announced in the UK that it was going to happen, there was a paradigm shift within the WWE mindset. That in and of itself, that decision either spurred or fast-tracked NXT UK. I think you can kind of immediately look at the talent that NXT UK went and launched and signed and everything that went with it. Jim Ross was going to be a part of the original World of Sport. Very, very tragic situation. He lost his wife, Jan, in January of 2017, but JR was going through a really, really tough time. But JR was going to be a part of World of Sport on the original series. But when they got wind of that, WWE launched NXT UK, called JR, in JR's words, not mine, gave him his jersey back. So that whole pre-launch and announcement was a foundation shaker in the UK because of the potential. The potential's still there. They launched it, and that's a whole nother conversation, but on the early stages, and we were in discussions, and Kevin Sullivan was on board by this time back at Impact, and Ed. And look, again, I'm going to defend Anthem here, Conrad, help me out. So they're still dealing with, we'll call it Corgan, Airlux, and Dixie. Here's Jeff. They brought that set of circumstances, and we're looking at a merger, we'll call it, with Global Force Entertainment and Anthem Wrestling Exhibitions. Then all of a sudden, World of Sport opportunity comes up. All right, how do we add that to the piece of the puzzle? And like any network, they're looking for partners in all avenues. And if you're going to, I'll say, share in the upside, well, you got to share in the risk. So how does a partner like Anthem and ITV get together? ITV has airtime and has production facilities and has studios, so they can put their sweat equity into it that way. How does Anthem put it into there? Well, a couple of ways. One would be talent. The other would be capital. So again, when you kind of look at the tea leaves, ITV was looking for a capital infusion. Well, maybe if this would have come a year later, Conrad, I think that would have been a real potential. It coming 120 days into their opportunity, it was, hey man, we got to figure our roadmap out. We just can't be spending money in 4 or 5 different places. Make sense, Conrad?
Total sense. You got in business, you gotta crawl before you walk.
That's it.
There's some news and notes that just really tickle me. As a reminder, our old pal Dorian, whose family owned AAA, and they've started Lucha Underground, and they've been working with the Crash. This all gets sideways in a hurry. There's a referee involved in all this, Marty Elias, who was actually the referee in the main event of this most recent Triple Mania. And friend of the show, shout out to Marty, former WWE referee. They're going to ask you guys to digitize the referee's face in the match between the Hardy Boyz and Super Crazy and Psychosis. This was a match that was filmed in Tijuana, and we're going to air it on Impact from the Crash show. But you guys get a legal letter about this. At the same time, you're having conversations with Dorian. How does all this get sideways?
All right, Conrad, just because you always do a good job about this. So Anthem Wrestling Exhibitions, brand new to the space, right?
Yeah.
I mean, brand new. We're in discussions with Dorian Roldan, owner of AAA Wrestling.
Yes.
In the words that I used then, and sometimes when people don't know, they're the WWE of Mexico. Oh, I got it.
Yes.
They get a letter from Lucha Underground saying you can't air this match on your network because not a talent, but because of a referee who's under contract to us. Wait a minute, Jeff. You just said Dorian wants to do business with us. Yeah, but I'm sorry, but now Dorian's a part of Lucha Underground and they're US based. Well, where is Lucha Underground right now? Well, now it was this wrestling series. And when did it air, Conrad? I'm just trying to think. It's kind of irrelevant, but it's not like we were impinging on this huge IP.
No, it was on the back burner at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was so convoluted that Lucha Underground is stopping Impact from airing a tape with the Hardys who went out and worked for the Crash, but Dorian wants to do business with us and do co-branded live events. You think Ed Norton wasn't going crazy at this point?
Absolutely. It's who's on first.
Oh my gosh. And look, that's hard. That was, I mean, I got it. I mean, I totally understood. Okay, Ed, this is not what you signed up for. You know, I know that when I got into it and talking with my attorney, and I won't use his name, but I'm like, yeah, pal, this isn't what we signed up for, is it? Nope, it sure isn't. And you should, I don't want to hear it out of you. But on the flip side, same thing with Ed.
Let's just remind everybody that the letter doesn't just come to you guys. I'm sure that over the years, TNA got many of these sort of, I mean, listen, if you're going to be in the wrestling business, you're going to get a cease and desist. I had a wobbly table in the back of the office, and I got a whole stack of them some bitches. They send the letter to the Crash and Conan and Pop TV too. Pop TV, of course, you don't want to piss them off. You don't want to ruffle any feathers there. So whereas maybe, right, there's an issue with the referee in the match, Pop has to be a little more concerned about this than TNA. No?
Oh my. And again, it was not a spike deal, but there was revenue coming in.
Yeah.
So, and equally as important as revenue in this set of circumstances, they were our visibility. And we're going to run the risk. It was just a complete mess. Now, you also have to understand whose match is this?
Right.
The Hardys.
Yes.
Which further it was, I mean, you talk about, you said, that's good, Conrad. Who's on first? No, he's on second. I mean, it was such a mess. So, yes, Pop TV was our major concern. And we jumped through hoops and did what we had to do to make it right. Because, again, Pop TV, we're a 2-hour show out of X amount of hours. They don't want a headache. So we'll cure the headache for them.
The Hardys contract expires on February 27th. They're still the tag team champions. And Matt's wife, Rebby, would go on Twitter and write, I've said it many times. TNA was the perfect situation for our family, and how grateful I was for professionalism and open communications and respect. Now think about what kind of negative changes and straight fuckery would have to go down for us to leave. Meltzer would say TNA wanted them to sign a short-term deal and put them on TV, but they wanted to remain free agents and not sign a new deal since TNA badly wanted the ability to book them on independent dates. It's not a lock that they are WWE bound, but that does seem to be the likely result. Eventually, in early March, Dave would write, there's tons of changes going on behind the scenes. A lot of people who worked for the company in the past have been contacted, and Jeff's big marketing idea is something along the lines of, let's make TNA great again, which did work in the presidential election. The idea is to present the idea of the good old days of TNA when JArrett was in charge, with the idea that things went off the rails, perhaps not using that term since he was gone. But on TV, they're going to bury Dixie Carter's regime, whether by name or not, and essentially say the product went to hell. Now, listen, I understand that Dave has to fill spaces on a page. I get that. I'm not diminishing that like you do sometimes here on the program.
I do not.
But I would say, well, you call him a fiction writer and all this other hateful nonsense. But I do want to remind everybody that one of the best and most effective marketing campaigns of that era, if you go back and you think, was Domino's. Domino's spent millions of dollars on commercials that said, hey, remember our pizza and how bad it sucked? It was flavorless cardboard and it was awful. Well, try it now. It's a lot better. Look at all this cool stuff we're doing. And on some level, just acknowledging, yeah, we were great. And yeah, we lost our way. But hey, man, we figured it out. It turned Domino's around in a major way. And they grew by leaps and bounds. And that marketing strategy was effective. And I think a lot of fans who either grew up watching TNA or were definitely rooting for them and considered themselves fans at one point had maybe wandered away because, well, it was flavorless cardboard pizza of wrestling for a while. But hey, it used to be good, and by God, it will again. I like the strategy. I like the marketing. Did the Hardys not like all of these changes? Was it all just about, as far as you know, the IP, the money, the terms, the dates, the creative? Because you're certainly painted with a brush as if to say, well, this is Jeff's fault.
I truly believe. Now, again, I have the luxury of talking in 2023.
Right.
But you know, hindsight's 2020. I think it, in so many ways, boiled down to they wanted the IP because they wanted to carry it with them, whether they had the deal with WWE Inc. or not. They wanted to use that post Impact whenever that came, and they were willing to fight for it. And I get that because, again, I don't know what was said and what wasn't said. Whether Jeremy and Matt or Matt and Jeremy and Jeff or a plethora of them was. At some point, a judge would say, you own this or you don't, or they own this. But I believe that was, and I'm sure money was involved in that as well, but money I think the IP stood on top of it all. I don't think they gave two craps, or I don't even know how much they knew about the rebranding and the this or that, because they both knew I wanted them a part of the show because they're top talent, regardless if they're Final Deletion or the Hardy Boys or whatever. They knew that, but the IP was their issue. Would be my, I guess. I believe the IP, and I'm sure again, like money was a part of that, but it was everybody's bitch about money. They wanted more money. The rebranding, Conrad, that's pretty cool how you talk about the Domino's thing is. I know that was something that we never got up and running, but the whole deal that Ed and myself, and I don't want to say Ed brought it, but it's like, man, can we recapture, in Ed's mind, can we recapture that Spike deal of 25 million a year? But how do we do that? And I'm thinking to myself, we have to show them that. And I still say, how Conrad, we joke, and not we joke, others joke, or TNA LOL. I think a more accurate phrasing would be Impact LOL, because the LOL really took center stage when we started confusing the branding and the silliness and wrestling this and just all that. The TNA part, I still think there's some equity in that. That may be a crazy thing, but when we were kind of going through the what's the marketing mindset is, hey man, we've got an awesome library and there's a lot of successes. And it all kind of germinated out of the conversation that in 2016, I don't think you could get more bad press for a wrestling company than they got.
No, it's the worst year any company ever had.
I'd never seen anything like that in my life. How public it was. Yeah. The Dixie Billy court battle, just to get back to sea level, was going to be a incredible pull, because it was bad PR. Bad PR, because all that stuff came out, and I'm thinking, guys, we're going to have to say, I wanted to acknowledge it. That's where I was going with it, Conrad. You said that Domino's basically acknowledged their screw ups, but give us a shot now. That's exactly what the whole mindset was internally. Hey, we had a rough couple of years. Here we go.
Well, we're going to talk about what part of your plan was to sort of get back some of that consumer confidence on part 2 in the future. We'll try to hit that here in the first of Q1 here in 2023. But next week, Jeff, we're going to catch up and talk about Against All Odds 2008. We got Booker T taking on Robert Roode, Awesome Kong in there with ODB. We got Eric Young defending his World Beer Drinking Challenge, or whatever it is, against James Storm, and lots of fun stuff on this program, including Kurt Angle taking on Christian with Samoa Joe as the enforcer, and Team 3D having to weigh in with the X Division. It's going to be a lot of fun next week on the program.
Definitely.
In the meantime, I want to encourage you to go check that show out, Against All Odds 2008. You can check it out over at impactwrestling.com/packages. Be sure to use our promo code Jeff. You can actually watch some of this deletion stuff that got everybody so up in arms in 2017, and go watch Against All Odds from 2008 over at impactwrestling.com/packages. And Jeff, I can't believe this is real. Sincerely, you want to talk about specials and one-offs. This past week, to celebrate the 35th anniversary of the very first Royal Rumble, we had Hacksaw Jim Duggan join us live over on adfreeshows.com and take questions as we did a watch along. We also last week did a live Q&A with you where fans could get on and ask any question they wanted. And we had Sean Oliver and Kevin Nash take a look at Diesel's match against Shawn Michaels at In Your House. You want to talk about a cool opportunity. That was all just 1 week. Well, the next cool thing that we're doing is February 5th. It'll be, I can't believe this is real, the 35th anniversary of maybe the most memorable angle in wrestling. The infamous twin referee angle with Earl Hebner and his brother Dave Hebner. It happened on the very first main event, not Saturday night's main event, but prime time on NBC, the largest audience in wrestling history at that point, with Andre the Giant pinning Hulk Hogan. It's also Earl's debut. He's going to join us over at Ad Free Shows, and it happens this Sunday, February 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern. You want to talk about cool wrestling history. Does it get any cooler than that angle, Jeff?
Conrad, where did you watch that show at? Did you watch it live?
I did. I was in my my parents' living room in Prattville, Alabama.
So I wrestled Jonesboro. Now, this is where like Karen will just want to backhand me. You can remember this, Jeff, but you can't remember this. So I wrestled in Jonesboro, Arkansas on this date. Came on at prime time, but good old Randy Hales, what did he have? A VCR.
Oh, there you go.
Buddy. I could not wait to watch it. That angle came off. Now I'm supposed to be, I'm still not, but I'm supposed to be smart to the business.
Right.
When they did the twin gimmick, I could remember having the conversations in 93 when I went up full time and worked for Vince with Dave and Earl. And I just raved about that. Folks, if you're listening to this and y'all don't know what we're talking about, go out of your way to watch the angle and try to just teleport back to
yes,
kind of pre-kayfabe and no dirt sheets and not cable TV going crazy and no Dark Side of the Ring and no Meltzer and Keller and just go back to being, hey man, this isn't my territory wrestling, but this is Hulk Hogan in WWF. Take a look at it. Conrad, when they did that, it was, I mean, a magical wrestling moment. Definitely top 5 in my book.
And we're going to relive it coming up on adfreeshows.com, February 5th, 8 p.m. Eastern. Earl Hebner will join us. We're going to do a fun little watch along and pick his brain on the greatest wrestling angle of all time. And of course, when you join over at Ad Free Shows, you don't just get our shows early and ad free. You actually get to tune in. We got a live studio audience here today. Shout out to everybody watching over in the group chat. I see the usual suspects are here, man. We got Eddie, we got Josh, we got Mark, we got Coach Rosie, we got DJ Maddie G, we got Amy Vaughn. Shout out to the whole crew for riding with us today. Man, I don't know what I expected from us talking about your return in 2017, but I feel like we got the story started, but there's still so much to talk about, dude.
Conrad, to my right, your left, but you can't see it. I have a Slammiversary 15 turnbuckle pad that all the talent signed on it. Don West. Look, when we get to this episode, Conrad and JArrett, when we get into it, but Don West and Robert Flores, Roflo, they were play-by-play in color, and we did a storyline with Jeremy Borash and Josh Matthews. They both were excellent in this. Scott Steiner, Abyss, good build-up. Alberto Del Rio and Bobby Lashley. It wasn't a 14,000 seat arena, but we turned folks away at Universal Studios to come see this event. Slammiversary 15 is personally one of my most favorite shows for so many reasons. We had worked against some crazy conditions, but LAX, anyway, that show and the creative gelling and everything that went with it. Yeah, it is definitely, I'm pumped right now to do that episode. So, looking forward to it, Connie.
It's going to be fun. In the meantime, we'll be back next week talking all things Against All Odds 2008 right here on My World.
Peace.